All right. Okay, let's begin at the beginning. This is your Imam and instructor for this evening, Benjamin Bilal. I welcome you to our part 2 session of the WDM Central broadcast, which happens every Thursday at 7 p.m. normally, but we're doing a part 2 based on what we left you with last Thursday. And it is on the subject of circumcision of the mind. And that was a topic that was presented to us in 1978 by Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. And it had a lot of interesting features in terms of what it was pointing to, especially as regards where we are right now in real time. So my only interest in representing his findings is to show you how they apply in many cases, even much more in our day and time, 2022 and counting, than it actually did back in 1978 and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and so forth. So that's what we're going to begin with. We said a lot already in part 1. If you missed that, you can simply go to YouTube and Google Imam Benjamin Bilal, and you'll have access to Circumcision of the Mind, Part 1. And we're going to jump right into what it is we need to say to you today. We mentioned circumcision as the clipping of the foreskin of the penis. The clipping of the foreskin of the penis. And I mentioned that the word clip, C-L-I-P, is consonantally connected to the word khalifa. Now, this is how we determine what are called the nunetic values in words. Nunetics is simply our system of evaluating consonants in words and understanding how these consonants actually exchange with each other and with other consonants to provide additional layers of meanings to words that you thought you knew because you looked it up in the dictionary. So if we're understanding that the consonants related to the word clip, which are the K sound, although it's a C, doesn't matter, it's a K sound in clip, the L sound in clip, and the P sound in clip. They are consonantally interchangeable with the letters that form the Quranic Arabic word khalifa. That is the kha letter. It interchanges with the ka letter as a guttural from the back of the throat. There is the lam letter in khalifa, the L sound, and you can hear that L sound in the English word clip. But there's a P sound at the end of the word clip, and there's no P as a letter in Arabic. But because of the fact that the P is also a labial, I have merely to interchange that P with one of the labials that we have available, and that would be the letter F. You need your lips to pronounce both. That's why they're called labials. So clip is interchangeable with the Arabic word khalifa. Now, what does that mean? Why is that important? It's important because when you understand what it means to clip, clipping is separating a layer of something from a general body of something. If I clip my fingernails or if I clip my hair at the barber's, it means that I'm separating part of my hair that I consider to be unnecessary. And I'm actually putting myself in a better situation to present myself more civilly, if you will. If I'm walking around with fingernails that look like a werewolf paws, that's not good. I clip my nails. I don't want to accidentally scratch anyone. My children are hugging me and, oh, Dad, you scratched me. Oh, really? I need to clip my nails, right? So it has to do with the underlying theme of separating out that which is unnecessary or even that which might be dangerous. That's what clipping does. All right? And that's what a khalifa does. The khalifa comes to separate out those behaviors and attitudes and personalities that are not in consort with Allah's guidance. So the behaviors that we take on, the lingo that we begin to repeat over and over again, which turns out to be street language, all of those things, We need to begin clipping them from our personalities. We need to begin making adjustments so that the unnecessary behaviors, the unnecessary emotionality and attitudes become separated from the greater body of our excellence as human beings. So I've said all of that, and if that's all I said, you've got enough to really study what this theme is for tonight, called circumcision. So the clipping of the foreskin of the penis is symbolic of something, according to Imam WDM Muhammad. He wasn't talking about you running out there and trying to get a physical circumcision from anybody. That's barbaric as far as I'm concerned. You can argue with it if you want. I was born into the Judaism religion where it was forced upon us, and a newborn infant at 8 days old has no say in the matter. Yeah, but I'm telling you, it was an unnecessary operation. So be aware of that, especially those of you who think it's Islamic. Muslims are supposed to be circumcised, the Muslim boys. It says who? Where's that in the Quran? I read about the clipping of the ears of certain animals as being haram in the Quran. Yeah, Allah don't want you clipping on their ears. I'm not sure how much he's going to be in favor of you clipping on their little wee-wee. You better check your logic before you say that Allah says we're supposed to be circumcised. But anyway, that's a story for another day. I'm going to do a whole diatribe on that very soon, bringing all of the facts so that we can live more nature-based lives and stop this idea that Allah brought us here so imperfect that now man has to intervene and make us whole. Allah brought us here with all of this foreskin, and now man has to intervene and say, that's too much. Why did God put all of that on that? We got to do something about that. Let's get rid of some of that. That's not how Allah works. Anyway, Imam Muhammad said that the clipping of the foreskin is symbolic of the removal of unnecessary mysteries from the mind. Isn't that beautiful? It is symbolic of the removal, not of the physical foreskin, but the removal of unnecessary mysteries from the mind. The penis throughout all cultures has always been a symbol of your leadership in the head. In the penis, they call it a head, but on your body, they call it a head, and they'll tell you, man, you better stop thinking with your little head and start thinking with your big head. You've heard that before. We have to tell our children that sometimes, right? So these are signs from Allah. They're not nasty. They are instructing signs. This is science that Allah has put into the human structure so that we might ponder these things, contemplate these things, so that we'll become wise enough to deal with the challenges of life. The conscious mind represents the foreskin. The conscious mind. It can be plagued with ideas which are not serving the purpose upon which the conscious mind has been created. The conscious mind had been created in order to separate moral ideas, moral qualities, actions, and all of these things, separate them from the false ideas and the false behaviors, which serve to sully and make nasty the thoughts which are being layered in a way which gives conscious attention to those thoughts. In other words, in the case of a circumcision, if you are just the kind of nasty boy that never gives attention to the cleaning of that particular part of your genitalia, then yes, it's going to grow to be nasty, funky, and all of those things which are reprehensible to people. But Allah let that stuff pile up like that so that it will be brought to your conscious attention that you need to pay more attention to cleaning around this area. Not so that you clip it off. Pay more attention to the cleaning of this area. If Allah put it there, guess what? It's for a reason. So in the same way that you separate filth from beneath the foreskin, you are also to separate filthy ideas and filthy behaviors from your conscious thoughts. In the Quran, that conscious part of the mind is called nasiyah. Nasiyah. In Surah 96, beginning with ayat 9, Allah says, "Do you not see one who forbids a votary when he turns to pray? Do you not see if he is on the road of guidance or enjoins righteousness? Do you not see if he denies truth and turns away? Doesn't he know that Allah does see him? Let him beware. If he desists not, we will drag him by the forelock. Bil nasiyat. Bil nasiyati. A lying, sinful forelock." And again, the word for forelock in the Quran is nasiyah. You can only lie and deceive in this part of the brain. You have a triune brain structure sitting in your skull right now as we speak. It begins with a bottom level brain called reptilian brain. It graduates to become the brain that's sitting right above it. That's now known as the limbic brain, also called the mammalian brain, because it's the brain that all mammals have. And sitting above that, you have the crowning achievement called the neocortex. That's your thinking brain, the one that Imam Muhammad used to refer to as where moral and rational thought takes place. That's the neocortex. And it's responsible, I repeat, for making critical decisions. In the movie The Matrix, as I mentioned a few days ago, the reason why the main character was called a Neo is because he was in charge of making critical and important decisions. The red pill or the blue pill. The agents and walking out with them or trying to make it to that window ledge. And all of the way through the movie, he's responsible for making these critical decisions. And that's what the intellect does. The intellect is where the forelock operates. Intellect means internal election. The internal way that you have of choosing what is good over what is not so good or what might even be bad or even evil, and separating yourself from the bad in order to preserve the good. So the part of the brain, I repeat, that can lie intentionally, consciously, not tell the truth. The only part of those three parts of the brain that can do that is the neocortex. So nasiyah is an area of the brain known as the forelock, which in anatomy is called the forebrain. And this part of the brain controls moral and rational exchanges of information. The brain is the center of the body. The main divisions of the brain include the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. And I want you to equate those to those three parts of the brain that we spoke of just now as the triune brain. The forebrain would be your neocortex area, your midbrain would be your limbic area, and your reptilian brain would be the hindbrain, as it is connected to the spine going down your back. Allah says, by putting these words in the mouth of Iblis in Surah 7, Ayah 17, ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. Translated, then I will assault them. This is Iblis speaking. From before them, min bayni aydihim, from between their two hands. It literally says, I'm going to assault them from between their two hands. And as I mentioned, if you drop your two hands down to the sides of your body and look at what's in between them, it's going to be your genital area. So this is also a way of saying, in a very graceful way, by the way, that Iblis is going to attack the human being through his sexuality. Don't you see that happening in today's world? And he's also going to attack, he says, behind them. وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ. Khalifihim is from the same root that gives us the word we were just discussing called the Khalifa. But in this case, Khalifihim means the one who brings up the rear. And every time there's a new generation born, that new generation is supposed to be much more refined. Their game is supposed to be much cleaner, much more professional, much more admirable than the game of the people that they left behind. Those gangsters and people in American history that used to run the bootlegging operation and all of that. See, we're supposed to be much more refined as the generations continue to accrue. But if I can go back there and manipulate what's behind you, I'm also manipulating your history. So Iblis is going to manipulate that which exists between your two hands. He's also going to manipulate that which exists in your history. You'll be reading about your own history, thinking that that's what happened, and that's not what happened. So he's right there manipulating what you think happened behind you so that he can influence what's happening in front of you. He wants to influence what you think is about to come. So it further says that Iblis says that he will come at the human being from their right and their left. And I told you that's talking about the right and left hemispheres of your brain. That's not all it's talking about, but that's one of the premier meanings for what's there. Then Iblis concludes, nor will you find, talking to Allah, in most of them gratitude for your mercies. And the word for gratitude is shakirin, and I compared that word to the Sanskrit word chakra. Chakra are those energy centers operating within you as electromagnetic energies that are responsible for refining your internal life. They're responsible for taking your life away from simple materialistically oriented concerns and allow those concerns to grow, to develop, to evolve, so that they encompass much more than your material desires and pleasures, and they begin to encompass what is best for the whole. They become more ethereal, if you will, more spiritual, more open to helping people outside of its individual self and mouth and stomach. It now wants to help people whose names it doesn't even know. In some foreign country, they're sending aid, that kind of thing. That's the level of spiritual growth that we have been designed by our source creator to grow into. And Iblis said, I'm going to cut that off at the pass, because by the time I'm finished, their chakras won't be able to respond. They'll be at the lowest level of the chakra grid forever. That root level, base level, my safety, my security, my comfort, what's good for me. I'm trying to tell you something. This is where we are right now. It's a sophisticated plan for keeping us operating on the lowest energy levels of the chakras. So we are talking really about the assault on the human brain. The 5 senses were created in order to gather information. And this is the correct meaning for the Quranic Arabic word that all of us know and love. It's called the iqra. All of us have learned that as the first word possibly revealed to Muhammad the Prophet. Iqra. They translate that word into English as read. R-E-A-D. Iqra is from the verb qara'a, which means not he read a thing. Qara'a means he gathered or collected things. The gathering of letters and words in order to form readable sentences is something that happened much later in the development of society. In other words, reading is not the first or primary meaning for qara'a or for iqra. That's not the first. There wasn't even a book to read. And even if there was a book, why would Allah choose this man and make him a prophet and then introduce information to him through a 2-dimensional experience? Eyeball to page. That's all reading is if you're reading from a book. It's eyeball to page, and your imagination has to take you the rest of the way. But if you are being instructed to read a 3-dimensional creation to begin with, then you are being instructed to read all of that information that appears to all of your 5 basic senses. When you see a thing, hear a thing, taste a thing, touch a thing, and What's the last one? I forget. Anyway, you know the five senses. When you experience all of these things, that's reading. You're reading with your five senses. Well, how do you know, Instructor Bilal, that that's what Allah is saying? It's in the context of the statement. Listen. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. All right? Read, they say, with the name of your Lord who created. See, created is a reference to creation. So it's not asking you to read a two-dimensional book. It's asking you to read a three-dimensional and beyond creation. And because it is your Rabb who's asking you or inviting you to read, and knowing that Rabb has to do primarily with your evolution, then whatever Allah is inviting you to do under that title, Rabb, means that that experience is going to take on evolution. So the involvement of your five senses operating in creation are going to be responsible for the evolution of whatever your five senses are charged with creating. What is that? It is your five senses that are responsible for the creation of your human intellect. Yeah, that ability in you to choose what's good, leave behind what's bad, gather those things that are good, bring them to one place, and begin to determine how I'm going to use this to benefit my family, to benefit my neighbors, to benefit my, and it goes on and on. It stretches out from there, right? That's what iqra means. It means to gather or collect things. So yes, reading is the gathering of letters and words, but that's not the first meaning. Ancient families and tribes had to first harvest the produce, which was grown in their fields of agriculture. You hear that word? It's another one they got from the Qur'an. Agriculture. Where did they get that word? Or at least that prefix? Agriculture is from the word iqra. You heard it as soon as I said it, didn't you? Agri is iqra. And it's called agriculture because when it is mature, it needs to be gathered. It needs to be collected from the fields and harvested so that people in your household and people who are in the market to purchase those things that you grew in your field, because you've grown much more than just your family can deal with. That's harvesting. That is harvesting. The sharing of the produce is the harvesting part. That's agriculture. That's iqra. So when Allah says iqra, He's inviting us to do something that is going to, at the end of the day, be much more appropriate and much more beneficial to people outside of our immediate family and friends and neighborhood, etc. So if you're truly reading the Qur'an, you know how it's supposed to be manifesting itself through what you say and do to and for people outside of your situation, yourself, your ethnic group, your language group, your country. What are you doing to help people on the other side of this planet with what you were blessed with as a harvest of knowledge we're talking about now? What are we doing with what it is we know? Especially those of you who say you're a quote-unquote follower of Imam Warathdin Muhammad. 33 straight years? What are you doing with all of that? Some of you are. Most of us are not. And if we don't admit where we are, we can never really get to where we're trying to go. So we're talking now about iqra and its connection to agriculture. Agriculture. You don't know that the word culture is from the Arabic word kul. Kul, not with the Q, but with the K. Kul, akala, it means to eat. You see how these things come together? And I could go on and on and on, breaking down this word to show you how each part of it comes out of the Qur'an, including the tur part of culture. Watur is sinin. If you know how to make these connections, you'll understand better what the Qur'an is saying, and you'll understand the secrets that have been implanted into the English language and other languages that pulled from the Qur'an. That's what you're going to learn if you stick with Nunetics and this method of learning language. So this harvesting effort was the original economics instituted by humans. We call it trade. So when you read the word iqra, we're still talking about the circumcision of the mind for greater intelligence growth. When you read the word iqra, I want you to think about your brain's ability to harvest information gathered by your five senses as they canvas creation. So as you look around, sniff around, hear around, smell around, touch around, taste around, as you put all of these things within the purview of your five senses, you're going to be gathering information, gathering knowledge. As you gather knowledge, you're going to be challenged by other people who believe their knowledge is more credible than yours. So every time we have a new system of scholarship appear, we automatically go into I'mBetterThanHim.com. We all go to that site. So Dr. King and his followers thought that their message was better than Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and Booker T. Washington. His people thought that his message was better than W.E.B. Du Bois. See, as soon as scholarship appears, people begin to compare notes and say, this guy's knowledge, what he has harvested as information, is worth more to us than that guy or that woman's knowledge. That's the challenge that we have in front of us, to be able to sift through information non-judgmentally and say that if this is good for humanity, let's go with it. Doesn't matter that he's from Europe or the subcontinent of India or some remote part of Africa. Doesn't matter. As long as what he is saying is useful to all people, then we need to harvest that. See, that was the concern of the so-called angels and Iblis when Allah introduced the idea of making a Khalifa in the earth. And they asked the question, are you going to create one who's going to make mischief and shed blood? Shed blood? What's that all about? Why would Allah do that? These people had insight that the average one of us does not have. Imam Muhammad said that blood was a symbol of the social life, social interaction, and social distribution of those goods that represent nutrients for people in society. That's what your blood does. It distributes nutrients of vitamins and minerals and all kinds of goodies to every single part of the body that calls for it, whether it be the largest organs, such as the heart and the spleen and the lungs and the brain, or whether it be the more minute portions of the body, like your little toe. It still gets its portion of blood. And these angels said, are you going to allow this Khalifa to come into this world and begin distributing the social logic? Begin distributing that which is good for all parts of the body? We can't have that. Not while we're around here doing all of the rituals and the subhanallahs and the alhamdulillahs and reading our Torah and our Injil. No, we're doing all of this ritual stuff, this ritualism, and you're going to let these guys come in just because they are social distributors? Just because they're interested in making sure that there's economic parity and justice in the world? No, we can't have this dude just run up on us like that. So Iblis got hot. He knew what that meant. I'm not talking about somebody with a cleaver coming after you. He's talking about somebody who knows how to separate out those things that are necessary for human life and development, and separating them out from those things that are causing damage and harm to the human vessel. So look at what Allah says in that Surah 96. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Now we can translate that as gather, not read, but gather. Bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, with the permission of your Rabb or your evolver. You don't just gather information because it sounds good to you. You gather information that you believe to be approved by your source creator, and what constitutes approval by our source creator. The idea that the information that you're gathering is going to contribute to your evolution, your evolutionary development. That's what Rabba is pointing to most succinctly. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, gather with the permission of your evolver who created. So it's pointing to creation. خَلَّقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ. Let's talk about that. Created the human being from what Imam Muhammad translated as blood adhering, and alaq. Ain lam qaf. Blood adhering. Whenever you read about creation in the Quran, through the word khalaqa or khulq or khalaq, as we're doing now, خَلَّقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ. Don't just think about rocks and debris and grass growing and all of that when you think about creation. When Allah mentions khalaq, He's talking specifically about the propensity for creation to receive programming. So think about it like you think about your computer. Yeah, there's the machine, but what good is the machine if it's not able to be programmed to get the things done that you require? So khalaq also means He programmed this thing. So khalaqa al-insan means that He programmed the human being. And what is this al-insan? Well, Allah teaches you through the context of the sentence in which you find these words. You don't have to guess at what al-insan means. Allah is telling you, khalaqa al-insana min alaq. So you have to understand what an alaq is in order for you to understand better what al-insan is. Now, because it says min alaq, meaning from alaq, it's also saying that alaq is not the only ingredient. It's not the only substance or constitution used in the formation and creation of al-insan, translated as human being. Now let's see what this human being is, and then see how alaq factors into this momentum. This word al-insan is the typical word for human being plural. It's used in just a couple of cases to represent individual humans, but on the most part, as in this particular ayah, it represents the group, human beings as a species. Now, without going into a whole lot of what would turn out to be unnecessary detail, because most of you might not be familiar with the Nunetics to this degree, just kind of follow along and take my word for it for now until you study it on your own. The word insan is composed of the consonants nun, meaning N, and sin, the S sound. In, sa, and then there's a nun at the end again. Insan. Now, when you understand also that nun is a letter that is called a nasal letter, because to pronounce a nun and to sustain it in the mouth is going to reverberate through the nostrils, through the nasal passages. So if you can say to yourself right now, and you can feel that reverberation in the nose cavity. So the letter nun came to be associated with the idea of whatever the nose represents. And the nose is symbolic in psychology of intuition. Listen carefully now. We're about to go up another notch on the ladder. Intuition. That's your nose. They say the nose knows. Somebody might say something smells rotten here in Denmark, and they've been nowhere. They couldn't even tell you how to get to Denmark, but it's just a saying. To say that something smells fishy means that I sense intuitively that something ain't right here. And we've had these feelings from time to time, to not go to that party, to not take that drive. You know, there's an internal thing that tells you that this is not, and then you find out later about something crazy that happened, right? All of us have experienced that. or you get a feeling about somebody and that person calls you, or you get a feeling about somebody and somebody calls to tell you that that person has passed. This is the intuitive nature that Allah has clocked into every human being. We have it from birth. Infants have intuitive capabilities, but they cannot be fully trusted. Intuition cannot be fully trusted. It's only there as an assistant or as a predeterminer of information, while the human brain is busy gathering information enough to establish an intellect. So the infant is born with intuition. Sometimes you'll get next to that infant and they'll start wailing and crying, and I didn't even do nothing to this baby. What I do? Oh, every now and then there's people that he just don't want in front of him. How is that? Because he is intuiting something about you. It doesn't have to be correct, but he's intuiting that for some reason you are the bad guy for this evening. So you need to get away from me right now. It might take them a few years to grow out of that. I had a niece who was like that, and every time I come into the room, she just couldn't stand looking at me. We're best friends now because it's hit and miss. It's only there, I repeat, in order to be able to determine things that are happening in its environment before the introduction of a full-blown intellect. So keep that in mind. So we are gatherers of information. That's the first reading. We have to gather information. So insan, if you listen to the pronunciation, say it slow. Insan. In. There's no vowel given to that first nun or that first n. But there is a vowel given to that letter sin. So it says insan. Back to the nun. So there's a secondary noon, or what I like to call a secondary intuition. That is the property of those humans whom Allah has allowed to graduate up to the level of al-insan. He allowed you to be ins, same letters, I-N-S. He allowed you to be nas, same letters, N-A-S. And now you are graduating, evolving, if you will, up to the level of the extended human called al-insan. But what's extending it? It's whatever that letter sin means. If the pronunciation is halting itself upon the nun, it means that the intuition in these people, whom Allah is calling insan, the intuitive grasp is being muted in favor of the expression of whatever seen means. And what does seen mean? Seen is a letter that represents the human intellect in its ability to chew on information coming from its environment. Follow where this is going. Seen comes from the root word sana, which has to do with the chewing motion of the teeth. That chewing motion was seen by the ancient Arabs as what was responsible for the cleaning of the teeth, like the Arabs do with miswak. That's their toothbrush. They're brushing and they're rigorous going back and forth with their miswak over their teeth is what is responsible for bringing a shine to the teeth. And that word shine is related to the word sun. The S and the SH are interchangeable. And sana, S-A-N-A in Arabic, that root verb that gives us the meaning for the word seen. You see the S and the N in seen also. It also gives us the word sunnah, S-U-N-N-A or A-H, sunnah. And sunnah gave the European world the word sun, S-U-N, that big thing in the sky that shines, see, the sun. And the sun is the reason why Earth remains sanitary. You know it as sanitary. The sun cleans up the debris in the atmosphere, especially every morning. You feel that new smell in the air. Man, let it rain overnight and then smell that air in the morning. That's what we're calling sanitary air. And sanitary and sun and the sunnah are all related words. So, buddy, if you call yourself following the Sunnah of Muhammad, the only way you can prove that to me is if your behavior has been sanitized, if your mind, your thoughts, your aspirations are doing in the world what the sun does in its world, keeping things lit, keeping things bright, keeping things hopeful, keeping things growing. But if I come into your environment and you killing off everything except the cat, that ain't no sunnah. So we live and we learn. So Allah says a second time, iqra. And this is going to be in response to the evolution that's taking place in the alaq. What is alaq? It's an attaching substance. Imam Muhammad called it blood adhering. What did he say blood represented? Your social nature. So alaq also has to do with social gatherings. You go from gathering information and you begin to share that information with fellow humans. That's called a social gathering. It's the basis upon which sociology is established. So alaq represents social bonding. So add that to the list of meanings for al-insan. Insan, you stop on the noon. That means intuition has been arrested, but the letter seen has been given expression. That's the intellect. So who are these people? These are not nas, where the noon letter is given expression and the seen is thwarted or diminished. Nas. Insan gives rise to the seen, the letter seen, which means the intellect. So it's those people who are not operating based on intuitive spurts or intuitive grasp of things. It's those people like we have in modern day academia who see themselves as being representative of advanced knowledge operating in the intellect, not in the intuition. For the intuition part, you got to go to your grandparents, You got to go to old school people and say, can you tell me something about my birth chart or, something intuitive like that? Are you seeing something in me that I should know about? Can you read my palm one more time, auntie? No, those are people who have been established upon intuition. Al-insan are the people who have taken it up a notch and are not depending on intuition so much for advancement in the world. They're depending on the potential that Allah has clocked into the intellect and what it can do. So that's alaq. Social grouping. That's alaq. So Allah says a second time, iqra, gather. Wa rabbukal akram, and your evolver is most generous. Alladhi ilamal bil qalam, the one who taught with the pen. Qalam means pen. And what is pen according to Imam Muhammad? He said that the pen represents your 5 basic senses. Even in the world, in the English language, they have words like pentagon and pentagram, and it means 5-sided or 5-pointed. The bull pen, yeah. The bull pen is a circular area where they keep the bulls or where they keep the baseball players in pitching and training. But the idea is that it's a circle, and circle in the old world of language, particularly in Arabic, the circle is the way you draw the number 5, because your 5 senses are supposed to be circular. They're supposed to operate all together, continuous and contiguous with each other. So the one who taught with the pen, meaning Allah teaches you through your 5 senses. Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam, taught the human being what was before not known. Now let me say one more thing about al-insan before moving on. Imam Muhammad said that al-insan is the product of the human being as he grows into his social responsibility, and that happens through meeting other people that it was not yet familiar with. And in meeting those people, because those people have different tendencies, different cultures, different ways of dressing, different kinds of foods that they like, different languages, so you have to kind of learn what it is they're saying based on the repetition of these sounds in your ears on a daily basis. So it's the socialization that brings the human being into his thinking capacity, her thinking capacity. If all you had to deal with were your small brood, your little clan, 3 or 4 people, maybe 9 or 10 people in the same household, the challenges on your intellect are not going to be as dramatic as they will be when you begin to interact with the family next door or down the road or across the mountain or the river. Those represent sets of brand new challenges that the intellect now has to ponder. It has to think on. It has to learn how to placate these people. So al-insan represents the combination of the human being's social tendencies and the human being's thinking capacity. The thinking capacity has to always be cognizant of adopting to the social realities around it. So that's al-insan, the social man and the thinking man as one unit. And when I say man, I mean males and females, as you know. So Allah says that he taught the human being. Now listen to how Allah phrases this in the Arabiya. He says, "Allama al-insana," what was before not known. "Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam." This is beautiful language that has been criticized by the criticizers of language. They say, how could Allah be putting past tense words and future tense words in the same sentence? This is not grammatically correct. No, but it's fitra correct. So, allama, that word meaning he taught, has what's called a shadda on the lam, the letter L, making it 2 L's. So if I were to transliterate it into English, it would be A-L-L-A-M-A. Allama. What does that shadda mean? It means that that letter is being doubled. And because it is being doubled, it is being strengthened. And it means that it is happening not only literally on a doubling kind of level, it's also happening perpetually. So it's not just twice. It is actually happening on and on and on. Allah is always teaching us. It's not like he taught us. It's not alama. That's past tense. He taught the human being. No, this is allama al-insana, meaning Allah is always teaching us. Right now, Allah is teaching you, teaching me, teaching us. Ma lam ya'lam, what you before were not knowing. This is beautiful language when you understand it. Ma lam ya'lam. Ya, that's present and future tense verb. Ma lam ya'lam. That this teaching is happening right now, and the way Allah is bringing things to your intellect's attention is going to be happening all of the time. Lam is a negative that applies to things that have already happened, but ya'lam is a verb that's applying to things that are happening now and into the unforeseeable future. So let the knuckleheads go try to figure that out while we march forward. Taught the human being what was before not known. So the human being is having things revealed to him and her that were not a part of their societal mental scope, the grasp. Now societies come and they learn things, and believe it or not, they just have their slate wiped clean. And what they knew even 100 years ago are things that most of us don't know or haven't known, or if we knew them, we forgot them. Allah speaks about societies of people that have been buried beneath the sands to the point where we cannot even hear a peep out of them. And this society has to start over again, like in the days of Noah. This is so beautiful when you understand it. Now, our source creator is our guardian evolver who is constantly evolving human existence through the agency of genetic advancement. We're taking another snip in the circumcision, pay attention, our Rabb, our source creator, is constantly evolving humans, not just some ethnic group, human existence, through the agency of genetic advancement, not melanin advancement, not pigment advancement. Allah is evolving us through the agency of genetic advancement. And Imam Muhammad spoke to this phenomenon, particularly as it relates to African American people and our genetic memory bank, as C. Eric Lincoln called it, our Islamic genetic memory bank that remembers beyond your physical life's extension ability to remember. You're 50 years old, 60 something years old, 70, maybe 80 something years old, and you have a memory attached to your personal life and journey that begins about 3, maybe 4, 5 years old. You started remembering things that happened to you and other people. And then you grow to be however old, 90s or whatever, 100, doesn't matter. But that's your personal memory. That's not the memory that the Qur'an is speaking to when it uses words such as dhikr, remember when. We're going to be talking about that extensively on this Sunday. The memory that Allah is evoking and stirring within the human soul is genetic memory, not personal memory. So when Allah says that He taught the human being that which he was not knowing, it doesn't mean that you never knew it. It means that it's not a part of your physical life's journey's worth of information. But Allah can restore that memory anytime He gets ready to, through the agency of genetic advancement. This is so beautiful when you understand it. In other words, our genes are experiencing an evolution which some scientists have said has gone from 2-strand to now 4, 6, and even 12-strand DNA in certain parts of the world. Many of these advancements in DNA properties are in the darker and poorer parts of the world. You're about to see how Allah's justice unfolds. Many of these advancements, I repeat, in these DNA properties are in the darker and poorer parts of the world, the less privileged parts of the planet. The possibilities related to human genius has been clocked into those differentiations in terms of their frequencies. Let me repeat that. The possibilities that are related to the production of human genius has been clocked into those differentiations and frequencies. 2-strand DNA is going to have a differentiation from 4-strand, 6-strand, and definitely from 12-strand DNA. 12-strand DNA, they have found represented in the children who are born into that level of DNA. It automatically creates natural genius in that child or in those children. Natural genius. So we need to look further into that, because maybe what we're calling autism and ADD and HDAD and all of that, maybe those European sciences that have been evaluating that area of psychology and sociology, maybe they have left something out. Maybe there's something that their frequencies couldn't catch, that if we began to evaluate knowledge in those areas, we might be the ones to save their day, along with the days of all of our children going into the unforeseeable future. We have to become more interested in these sciences, is my point. So every strand of DNA represents a fluctuating frequency. They're not just there for no reason. DNA is short for deoxyribonucleic acid, and it is a molecule that contains the biological instructions that make each species unique. DNA, along with the instructions it contains, is passed from adult organisms to their offspring during reproduction. In organisms called eukaryotes, we're going to get back to that word in a moment. It's spelled EUKARYOTES. eukaryotes. In these organisms, DNA is found inside a special area of the cell called the nucleus. Because the cell is very small, and because organisms have many DNA molecules per cell, each DNA molecule must be tightly packaged. This packaged form of the DNA is called a chromosome. So we spoke last week also about the consonantal connections in these medical and scientific terms that are used. We spoke about this word chromosome. I told you chrome has a connection to the idea of color, but I didn't tell you that chrome also has a connection to the Arabic root letters karama. See, chrome, karama, that gives us the word karim. Karim. So if chrome is connected to color, and in the English language we say that cream always rises to the top. Isn't that wonderful? Well, what is color? Color is the topical view that you see of things on the surface. You scratch your finger across some paintings and you get to what's beneath it. You scratch your finger on a dark-skinned person and you scratch hard enough, you're going to see white, ash white. If you break the skin, you're going to see white skin beneath the black skin, because color, I repeat, is topical, like chrome and like karama, which means to be generous. Your generosity should be the thing that shows itself topically. When you go out, when you speak to people, when you assist people, they should see that part of you right away. Your generosity, not your stinginess, your generosity. Can I help you? If that's all you said that day, excuse me, ma'am, can I help you across the street with those bags? I see you struggling a little bit. Senior citizen. Yeah, can I help you with that? Can I get that door for you? See, that's karama. That's generosity. That's your cream rising to the top. All right. So there is a lot of information pertaining to the DNA and how it's structured. You can read those things on your own. But I mentioned them to segue back to these two readings, quote unquote, that are represented in the word iqra, being said twice in the beginnings of Surah 96. So let's for now call them the two readings. They're actually the two gatherings, the two collections. Those who study African history, you know that there's a character in African history called the griot, G-R-I-O-T, the griot. The word griot is also connected to the word iqra. The Q in iqra is the G in griot, and the T at the end of griot is a feminine suffix. And what did the griot do? The griot was responsible for the collection of narratives from his tribesmen. He collected the stories from the seniors, from the wise women. He went around and he investigated and estimated what information was going to be good for Friday night's powwow. You know what I'm saying, right? But he does it by collecting or gathering stories. And then he is able to relate those stories to the tribe. And they can't get enough of the griot. So I'm showing you how these different words from different parts of the world are related to each other. So you'll get away from that two-dimensional stuff in the translation of read. Your cells, cells, are your first community, and they are responsible for your first, quote-unquote, reading. See, there's a reading taking place among your cells, if you want to call that reading. They're gathering also. They're gathering information as we speak. It began as a unicell, so says science, and so says the Qur'an, min nafsin wahida. They call it one soul. We call it one cell. It's the same thing. So these cells grow from being one to splitting into two, and then to becoming three and more. Those, I repeat, are your first community. If you want to know how to design community life for longevity purposes, you can't go looking at the Communist Manifesto and see how their societies used to be run and then take that and apply that to your Islamic town. You can't go and look at what Saudi did as a society and think that if you do what they did, you're going to come into wealth untold like they did. No, it's not how that works. If you want to be a successful community, you have to follow the fitra-based design of what Allah created in you as your first community. And I repeat, your first community is the community of cells operating in your body to make your body who and what it is. And they did it because Allah clocked into your cells the ability to read. Your cells can read this environment. It can read this physical creation. It reads the food that you put into your mouth and can interpret that food in a way which allows certain parts of the food to go to certain parts of the body and create the human body continually over and over again. Because you ate a goat doesn't turn you into a goat. You understand? The body's cellular memory and intelligence knows to keep your human body in human form. No matter what you eat a fish, you're not going to turn into a fish. Follow that logic. The body's cellular memory knows what to turn that food into in order to complement your human profile. So it's reading physical creation first and foremost. We are also reading this physical creation by way of our five senses. We're reading with our eyes, with our ears, with our nose, with our tongues, and with our touch. We're reading physical creation. However, there is a secondary iqra, a secondary gathering or reading, if you will, and it is related not to sight, but to insight into creation. And insight allows you to begin translating physical signals coming into the brain in a way which allows you to then apply abstract values to those physical concepts. That's the second reading that the human being is intended to come into. And that is the level of reading that Allah sends a revelation in order to complement and evolve. And that's what's meant by عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ. Continuously taught the human being that which he was before not knowing. You weren't knowing it because you weren't born recognizing abstract values for things that you were looking at with your five senses or experiencing with your five senses. You looked at the book, you saw book. You looked at the table, you saw table. Imam Muhammad looked at the human being's legs and he saw moral and rational logic. You understand what I'm saying? You just seeing legs. He saw something abstract. Oh, this is a beautiful world we've been born into. So it's the abstract insight that you come into by the grace of Allah, subhanallah, that is responsible for the making of the true human within. If you want to hold on to your physical concepts and everything is material to you and everything is based on material dynamics and all that, you can hold on to that. But guess what? Your human life is not registering anything above what the animal's life is registering. The common animal registers these five senses. And in fact, these animals, in some cases, and birds and whatever, they're able to extend their five senses into areas that are much more dynamic than your physical five senses and what they can discern. There are animals that hear much better than we do. Your dog is one. They can hear a dog whistle. You can't hear it. Animals that can smell better than you. Again, your dog. Your dog can smell his way home from a few blocks over. Animals that have much better vision. The eagle, all of the way up there, flying near the clouds almost, can see a worm on the earth and go for it. You can't see like that. So Allah gave these common animals abilities in their senses that human beings have not been granted. Why? Because the compensation for not having all of that on the physical level is that Allah has brought you into much greater possibilities of evolution that exist within your abstract dimensions. So you should be focusing on abstract. That's why Imam Muhammad, once again, put an emphasis on us learning what he called metaphysics, not just physics, metaphysics. And he told us it was more important not to look at a thing, but to look into a thing. See, it takes abstract vision to look into a thing. Physical creation provides the blueprint for our body's cellular programming for the khulq that we discussed earlier. You find the blueprint for that in your physical cellular body and its programming. Insights into created matter provide for abstract connections, which take us above and beyond what observations of physical creation can provide. It's the insights into created matter, not just looking at it, but looking into it. You hear intuition and intuit. It's the basis of intuition. Tuit, tuition, intuition. They all go together. Now, along with the eukaryotes that I mentioned earlier are what are called the prokaryotes. Prokaryotes exist as organisms prior to the introduction of eukaryotes. Listen carefully. This is science and this is the Qur'an. We're talking now about the two so-called readings or gatherings or collections. Iqra, iqra, a second time. I'm equating them now with what science has called prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. So listen carefully. Prokaryotes are organisms made up of cells that lack a cell nucleus or any membrane-encased organelles. This means the genetic material DNA in prokaryotes is not bound within a nucleus. Instructor Benjamin Bilal is saying to you that on the scientific level of your very biology, this represents the first so-called reading. Prokaryotes are gathering information, but they're doing it lacking a cell nucleus. Keep that in mind. That's the first reading. Read with the name of your Lord who created. You're just reading creation. You don't have any idea what these things mean abstractly. You're just enjoying the bliss of being able to recognize these things in the creation for their aesthetic qualities and values. Oh, how beautiful that sky is this morning. Sailor's delight, right? At night, clouds floating through the air, sun shining, beaming through the trees. You know these songs we write, right? But that's just topical. That's just physical. That's your material appreciation for material creation. That's a reading that is prokaryotic. Then you have the reading that is secondary, that are called eukaryotes. Those are organisms made up of cells that possess a membrane-bound nucleus, meaning it holds DNA in the form of chromosomes. So that's where you get your chromosomal development, from your eukaryotes, not from your prokaryotes. Do you know that there are things that you get that are very basic and fundamental from your aesthetic appreciation of creation? Yeah, you get value, emotional value and all of that and whatever. You know, you say, alhamdulillah, you know, you say these things. Alhamdulillah, you know. That's beautiful, brother. Allah you akbar, you know. That's us. I love us. We're new people. We got to go through that. So those are the prokaryotes. But the second reading, the eukaryotes, are organisms that are made up of cells that possess a membrane-bound nucleus. So there's much more to protect coming out of the eukaryotic development than there is coming out of the prokaryotic development. And I'm going to show you how wise these linguists are. Look at the word prokaryote and then look at the word eukaryote and begin to piece that apart. Take off the pro from prokaryote. Take off the EU from eukaryote. What do you have left? Karyote. Take off the O-T-E-S from prokaryote. Take off the O-T-E-S from eukaryote. What do you have left? A town that I used to live in not that long ago called Cary. And the Cary and its root letters are consonantally connected to qur'an and iqra. So these people in the sciences, they know what you know not. And the only reason you don't know it is that you're spending most of your intellect's life involved in nonsensical information and foolishness right now. Comedy Central. That's the only reason they know it and you don't. And most of them don't know it. They share this with a very few minds among them. But it's our day now. It's our time. So wake up and join us. These two karyotes are the two iqras, the two readings. One is dealing with surface creation. The other one is dealing with insight into the higher levels of understanding regarding creation on the abstract levels of things. Man's struggle has been to understand his life. The key for the proper development of the human intellect is to recognize the source creator as being above, beyond, and independent of creation. This is the tipping point or the dividing point in human history. People were believing that God, quote unquote, was part and parcel of the created things that they were used to being involved in. This tree god, the river god, or the sun god, or whatever. They believed that it was part and parcel of created things. There came a point with the institution of revelation through the prophets and messengers where a dividing line was established between what humans saw as creation and what human beings were now growing into an evolutionary understanding of in terms of those things that were created, being created by a source creator who is above, independent of all things in creation, does not have the nature of creation, does not have to be born, does not have to grow old or become diseased or become sleepy and die or be crucified. None of those things pertain to the source creator. And every time human society gets off track, Allah sends another clear message through another clear messenger or set of messengers to once again straighten the line, take it from crooked back to straight. Mr. W.D. Farad, the teacher of Elijah Muhammad, said that there would come a time when there would be a shortage in the gravity. These are his words. A shortage in the gravity, and that shortage would produce fire and set the whole atmosphere on fire. Now, you need to know that Mr. W.D. Farad was very careful in how he chose words. Because he was not a native English speaker does not mean that he was not thoroughly familiar with the English language. I believe he was. I believe that he was a linguist, and I believe that he was also a master of etymology. And we'll have that conversation at some other time. Suffice it to say for today that he warned us that there would be a shortage in gravity that would produce fire and set the whole atmosphere on fire. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad came behind him to say that we should hope to be far away from that fire. That fire would be no good for the human being. Now, and in case you didn't notice, the world that we're living in, presently speaking, the entire world's atmosphere is on fire right now. Just keep that as a process note and stick it into your back pocket. So he was warning us about a fire that was going to be no good for human development. And to set a thing on fire is to set it ablaze. You've heard of that. A-B-L-A-Z-E. And ablaze is consonantally connected to the Quranic Arabic word iblis. The S and the Z are fricatives and they can be interchanged. So the BLZ in ablaze is also the BLS in Iblis. And interestingly enough, the Quran says that Iblis was created from fire. The entire world of academics is what we're discussing now. That's the fire that Mr. W.D. Farad was talking about. That's the fire that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was warning us to stay far away from. It's the fire of men's opinions. It's the fire of those selfish attitudes that believe they can do it better than you because they know more than you. That's the fire of egotism and arrogance that Mr. Farad was warning against, and that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad cautioned us to stay far, far away from as a fire. So we're talking now about the entire world of academia as it has been established in this modern world. It has actually been reduced down to what I call Iblisian selfish self-interest. That's a term that was coined by Imam Muhammad. Selfish self-interest. And I call it Iblisian because Iblis in the Quran was the first character to manifest this level of selfishness. And selfish self-interest responds out of the lower emotions. Those responses coming from your selfish self, they emanate out of your lower emotions, notably the solar plexus, which governs your self-image and also your personal ego. Do you remember during the 70s when they pronounced that we were coming into what they coined the me generation? That was the social schemers manipulating the human system of energies in order to calculate the level to operate on the lower ego, personal, me type frequency. It can happen for individuals, and it can also be manipulated in a way where the general body of society comes into that same frequency. So that's Iblis on this level. The solar plexus energy. You know, solar means sun. And when you think about the sun, you think about fire. The solar plexus is that level of energy within your chakra system that is just beneath the heart chakra. Just beneath. You have your root chakra at the bottom of the spine. You have above that your sacral chakra. And then right above that, you have the solar plexus chakra. And it's the one that says, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror is supposed to scream out, you is. It's you, baby. Who else you think? You're the fairest, my man. Yeah, I can't wait for payday. Selfish self-interest. Now, the word plexus, P-L-E-X, with the suffix us, is also interchangeable with the word Iblis. The P in plexus is the B in Iblis. The L in plexus is the L in Iblis. And the X is a fricative from the front of the mouth that is interrelated with the letter S. So plex and plexus is related to the word Iblis. And as I told you, if they have consonantally connected letters, it's going to be connected in terms of the meaning. You do that research. You go look up what plexus means. I'll tell you, the base meaning is, it means those things that are intertwined like braids. You know, when we talk about plaited hair or braided hair, those letters are also interchangeable. BRD in braid is the PLX in plexus. The B interchanges with the P. The R and the L interchange, and the X and the D, because they're pronounced from the front of the mouth as sibilants and dentals, they are also interchangeable. So plexus and braids are related. You remember when Allah mentions in the Quran in Surah Al-Falaq about the blowing on the uqad? Nafathati fil uqad, the breathing on the braids is what it's talking about. But it's not talking about your grandma's braids. It's not talking about your cousin Tanisha's braids. It's talking about something much more complex than that. Moving right along. Now, there are shortages in electric current. I'm giving you the understanding of Imam Muhammad speaking on this lesson of Mr. W.D. Farad in the lecture, Circumcision of the Mind, just so that you have a reference. He said that there are shortages in electric current, but there's no such thing as a shortage in gravity. Things touch where they were not supposed to be touched. That's what creates a shortage as an electric current shortage. When wires touch that were not meant to touch, then it causes a shortage in electricity. But Mr. Farad carried this idea over into the shortage of gravity. Let's look at what he was discussing here. Gravity for Mr. Farad, and these are again Imam W.D. Muhammad's findings. Gravity is a code word for how our lives gravitate towards those things which separate us from our disciplines and from our excellence. Isn't that beautiful? So that's the gravity that Mr. Farad was discussing. He was talking about not physical gravity. He was talking about the idea of gravitating towards things which cause a shortage and a separation of ourselves and our excellence from the disciplines that should rightfully be established. Imam Muhammad went on to say in this wonderful lecture, Circumcision of the Mind, he said that the ancient Egyptians were very wise in the knowledge of the human system. And he mentioned that the ancient Egyptians were the ones who gave this world a psychology, the study of the psyche. Psyche being soul as a meaning coming out of ancient Egypt. It didn't mean the mind. It didn't mean the study of behavior as it does today. It represented the study of the soul. Their focus back in ancient Egypt was on the human intellect. It was on the human soul, the human spirit, and the human passions. They practiced circumcision prior to the Jews practicing it, and they passed it on to the Jews and then to the rest of the Western religious worlds. They instituted a trick which has been working on the world for thousands of years now. They developed an impediment. These are my words. They, meaning the social schemers, they developed an impediment, a block for the mind, which has actually blocked intelligent human expression, which was intended to be free. Our human intelligence was intended to be liberated so that the human intellect could be liberated. Listen carefully. I'm speaking about two different things, human intelligence and the human intellect. And the title of Imam Muhammad's lecture was Circumcision of the Mind for Greater Intelligence Growth. So if you circumcise the top portion of the mind, called human cognitive development, human consciousness, if you get rid of the grime and the grub and all of those things that are situated in your conscious mind, then it's going to liberate that which is supporting your conscious mind. We call it the intelligence, the internal telling or communicating coming from the gens or the genes. That's what intelligence is. And it was intended to be liberated because that is the level of your human development that speaks directly to Allah. Allah doesn't have any conversations between your conscious mind and his regulations, but he does communicate with your DNA that is operating as intelligence in your gens or your genes. It's beautiful when you understand it. Let's continue. So the ancient Egyptians were about the business of practicing circumcision, and they taught it to the ancient Jews who passed it on to the rest of the religious world. And as stated, they instituted a trick, a scheme, which has been working on the world for many thousands of years now. They developed an impediment for the mind, which served to block intelligent human expression. Now, if you're looking out in the world today, you turn on your television or your computer, or you're in the supermarket and you're hearing all kinds of wily kinds of things being said, crazy kinds of conversations, people not even having respect for the elders in terms of what they say. They want to cuss and fuss and use all kinds of, even on television, you can't turn on the local news and they're not talking about mother hubbas and son of my butchers and all of that. Why is that? How did we come to this juncture in the road? That was unheard of when I was a child. I'm only 62. The time if you looked at an elder wrong, you get slapped in your face or told off by that elder, and then by your mother when she heard that you disrespected that elder. But today you can say anything to almost anybody in the name of freedom. Try to stop me, you're a racist. Imam Muhammad said a lot of what we're charging to racism really should be charged to bad behavior on the part of so-called African American people. You're just behaving badly, and somebody outside of your group, they peeped it and they told you about it, and then you want to call them a racist for them pointing out to you your wayward human behavior. It's amazing. That's not all of the time, but that's too much of the time. So be attentive to that. So when you suppress the intellect in turn is going to turn on the intelligence, and intelligence growth will not be the rule of the day. So Imam Muhammad said that they designed this scheme to suppress the free liberation of the intellect. And he said they did so for at least 80% of the world's public. And then he said amongst African Americans, it could be as high as 99.999%. Man, do you understand what this man is saying to us? That 99.9, that means all of us, basically. The entire so-called race, the entire ethnic group, the entire group soul that's connected to this African American experience is being suppressed in terms of their intelligence because their intellects have gone wayward. Now, continuing. Satan hides his actions by publishing his works. Wisdom from Imam Muhammad. Shaitan or Satan, the way he is able to so successfully hide what he is doing is by presenting what he's doing in the open public. Sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not. In this way, he is able to escape notice because the human mind does not suspect things that are out in the open. You suspect things that are behind closed doors, that are partially seen. If it's partially hidden, we tend to suspect it. I see that part, but what in the hell is going on the other side of that thing there? I see what you're saying with this half of what you've proposed, but I feel like there's something you're hiding from me that hasn't been said. So when things aren't said and when things aren't displayed openly, we tend to question those things. But if it's put right out there in the open, like, come get this is junk, take this, go take it to Goodwill, you don't think that that's valuable, so you don't question it. And the reason why we are suffering as an ethnic group is because we have allowed the general culture to present our life journey as a people as one big dramedy. That's when drama and comedy mix. Satan has the most grip on the African American people because of our inability to separate the serious from the playful life. They have done this mostly through our comedians and our entertainers, and that is also prevalent in today's time. Most of you can't live without your daily dose of bad language comedy. If you're going to watch comedy, at least go for dry bar comedy. Yeah, Google dry bar comedy, where all of the comics tell their jokes with no profanity and practically no images that relate to those things that are incorrigible or nasty, if you will. So they have to really be ingenious to come up with the jokes like that. But that's out of Utah, and they don't play that mess out there. And it's becoming the most popular comedy channel on the internet. Dry bar comedy. So this sort of in-your-face type of strategy of Satan, Imam Muhammad said that it's also his downfall. The fact that he puts this in your face like this, he says, it's also their downfall. He said, because human nature is such that in time it will get tired of jokes. And when that happens, those people will begin taking everything seriously. Just as we are doing today with our study of letters. We don't say because it's just the letters, it doesn't mean anything. No, we're taking everything, how the letter looks, how it looks as a glyph, how it looks, how it sounds, how it begins, how it ends. We look at the letter meme and we say that M sound is on the beginning and it's given a vowel, but the second meme is silenced. And we understand now that all of that means something. But the conspirators would have you believe, no, it means nothing at all. Just go with what we tell you are the root letter words. Don't worry about any seed letters. That's in your mind. That doesn't exist. No, you've lied to us so long, especially about language, that we're not taking anything you say seriously. And in fact, we're going to take everything serious that we used to not take serious. We're going to take our relationships more serious. We're going to take our child rearing more seriously. We're going to take our economics and where we spend our money more seriously now. Because we're finding out that you've been lying to us all of the time, sucking us dry economically, and you're walking away as the fat cats. And our people are still suffering. So they made sure that the majority of us fell in love with jokes. Jokes. And jokes are aimed at the jack in you. Listen carefully. A joke, J-O-K-E, is aimed at the J-A-C-K in you. And jack is symbolic of your intellect. Jokes are designed to weaken the intellect by allowing the emotional feel-good mind to take over the leadership position. This happens in increments. It doesn't happen all of a sudden or overnight. This process is put into place in order to be effectuated incrementally, in stages and imperceptible steps. That's how your intellect is taken over by wayward emotionalism. And they've done it, I repeat, through the agency of our finest comedians. Red Fox back in the day, Richard Pryor brought up the rear. That's the only reason they supported and promoted these people. They were funny. Yeah, you get a little belly chuck every now and then. But to put that on the silver screen as they did Richard Pryor, to the point where the average brother in the hood now wants to be nothing but a joker. Tell nothing but Richard Pryor jokes and what he said about the P word and the B word and the whatever. And, oh, he's just so open. He's a wonderful comedian. He was just so open with his life and drugs, and he was doing drugs. And you don't understand how Satan operates, my friends. You don't understand. They're doing it today through some of the most sophisticated of your comedians. I won't mention any of their names because they might change. Who knows? But I'm telling you that the assault is on the jack in you. And jack is assaulted through the joke. Whenever you see jack in a nursery rhyme, for instance, he is symbolic of the intellect. These characters mean something. So begin with the Jack and Jill. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Repeating, Jack is your human intellect. that likes to climb higher and higher up the hill of progress. He was accompanied by Jill. So who is this Jill? Jill is symbolic of your emotions. Jack represents your intellect. Jill represents your emotions, and they are supposed to be on an upward climb together. Allah put them in your human construction in order to operate as a unified couple. But Jack is supposed to be in the driver's seat. So Jack and Jill went up the hill. That means they were going towards all things that were approved by God. We call it Hilal. They call it Hill. Jack fell down. Not Jill first. Jack fell down. The intellect had to be interrupted and broke his corona. That's the Latin word for crown. You get it? And Jill came tumbling after. Jill represents the jilted emotional life, which suffers due to the lack of attention being paid to the intellect's leadership role. So when you don't have any more intellectual leadership over your body or in your body, then the leadership role defers down to the next leader in charge, which is your emotions or your heart. And to be jilted means what is meant in that song by the Stylistics: break up to make up. Break up to make up, that's all we do. First you love me, then you hate me. That's a game for fools. You remember that? That's a person who is being jilted. Unstable emotionalism operating in that person. That's Jill. Now, whether you believe this or not, the coronavirus is just another depiction of a scheme which has been planted into scriptures. It's been planted into popular mythologies, popular fairy tales, and nursery rhymes, outlining the process for the takeover of the human intellect, which leads to the suppression of your native human intelligence. That's what all of these stories are about. You read them to your children, not knowing that these are the topics at hand. The suppression of your intelligence through the crucifying of your intellect. The word corona means crown, and it is speaking to the same idea which they planted into the story of Jesus Christ's crucifixion, where the death of Jesus occurred only after the crown, the corona, had been crushed into the top layer of his skull. If his head were a penis head, the scraping against his neocortex, we're talking about those nails that were nailing the corona into his head, crushing the corona into his brain. It's going to first and foremost affect the top layer of brain called the neocortex, the moral and rational decision-making brain. But I repeat, if his head were a penis head, then the scraping against that neocortex would represent a circumcision of sorts. So let's go over again what intellect and intelligence actually mean, so we'll get the bigger picture. The word intellect is intellect, internal election, the internal choice making that's taking place within the conscious mind, the mind that is paying attention. That's where the intellect operates. It does not operate in your emotional brain. It does not operate in your instinctive brain. The intellect operates first and foremostly and only within the neocortex brain, while the intelligence means the internal telling or communicating that's coming from the gens or the genes. We're talking about now how your DNA and RNA communicate within your cellular package. That's called intelligence, and that was clocked into you by your source creator, whereas the intellect was not clocked into you by the source creator. The intellect is actually a gathering, going back to the earlier point, it's a gathering of information that takes place due to your 5 senses operating in the environment. So humans can dramatically influence what takes place in the intellect, whereas the source creator is dramatically in charge of what is taking place as information within your genes or your intelligence. So how does Allah save a people? Imam Muhammad was steady on the case of this. Allah saves you by retrieving you through your genes, your, in this case, Islamic genetic memory bank, but also your human memory bank. Allah can retrieve you through an appeal coming from Allah's ever-shifting frequencies that He created in the environment. He can use those frequencies to appeal to something that slave masters and manipulators of society, they don't know how to reach this part of you. In the Quran, this part of you is called the Masjid al-Haram, the sacred masjid, the inviolable masjid. It's not talking about some place sitting in the middle of the desert of Saudi Arabia. It's talking about an edifice that Allah has erected within you that is inviolable. It's within the core of your soul. And if you could just circumcise all of that filth out of the environment, Allah says, let there be no wrangling in this area. Let there be no foolish talk and fighting for no reason and all of that. Stealing from people. Don't let any of that corruption come into this area. This area has experienced a circumcision of sorts. You get it? It's talking about what's taking place. Alhamdulillah. It's talking about, thank you. It's talking about what is taking place in you and me. And until you learn to direct your attention in terms of what you're reading in the Quran, direct that attention towards what's happening inside of you, you're never, ever going to benefit from the wisdom of the Quran. You'll always see it as an extraneous book talking about extraneous people in history and highlighting the achievements of the Arabs over all other people. Now, if that's the kind of religion you want, so be it. Go for it. But I know what Allah is doing here. He's creating a whole new people who are going to have a whole new set of possibilities that are going to be so unrelated to what you're seeing in the world now. This is a world that's going out. Imam Muhammad told you that in 1975. In his first public lecture, Savior's Day 70, he told you this world is on its way out. Go back and visit that. I think that's on YouTube. And then he introduced incrementally what he meant by that in hints and clues along the way so that he wouldn't be, as they would say now in YouTube land, so that he wouldn't be shut down. Imam Muhammad was a master of which words to use that would not allow him to be isolated and shut down. They did their best anyway, but they had no grounds for shutting him down, just like they have no grounds for taking me off of YouTube. We're going to be leaving anyway on our own volition. But if they comb through the 70-something, close to 80 videos that I have up, they won't find one single statement that would represent an excuse for them to excuse me from that platform. Let's continue. Now, I want you to see the intellect as the biblical Adam. And I want you to see the intelligence as the biblical Eve. If we have any Christians out there, maybe Christian preachers are listening or will listen on YouTube. Man, if you would develop a Sunday preaching around what I'm telling you now, you'd be the love of the church. Maybe not the love of the leadership there, but the love of the church for sure. See the Bible's Adam as the intellect and what possibilities can occur within the intellect. And see the Bible's Eve as the emotions operating within the intelligence. That's the biblical Eve. Adam is the intellect. Eve is the intelligence. Adam, according to the Bible story, was put into a deep sleep, which left Eve vulnerable to the whispers of the serpent. Look at the word serpent. Serpent means beneath. Pent means 5. So the serpent represents something that is operating beneath the 5. The 5 what, instructor? The 5 senses that we've been discussing. That which develops you into an operational intellect. So that's the serpent. His job is to position himself at the undergird of what will eventually become your intellect. In other words, he subverts all of the possibilities for your intellect to become a developed creation in you. And he does it by positioning himself at the door of your intelligence, which is regulating over your DNA, RNA. So whenever you hear these wily rascals in so-called science talking about doing something to your DNA and your RNA, be sure that the serpent is not far behind, especially knowing that Adam, your thinking brain, your conscious brain, your intellect, has been put into a deep sleep. So that deep sleep of Adam is what left Eve vulnerable to these whispers coming from the serpent. Now, when you allow your intellect to become relaxed, that's what a deep sleep is. It's a relaxation period for you, where your conscious mind is not aware of anything going on in your immediate environment. People walk around you when you sleep. People do funny things. Your children come up to you and put their fingers in your face. They know you can't see them. You sleep, you're snoring. So you are vulnerable in terms of what the environment can do to you. That's the Adam we're talking about. That's the intellect that we're talking about. A vulnerable intellect, because the intellect has been put into a deep sleep or slumber. When you allow that intellect to become that relaxed, the mind will immediately defer over to the emotions for decision making. If you live with your mommy and daddy and you know that daddy is the one working, bringing in the money, paying the bills, and so forth, then your common sense mind as a child says, when dad gets home, I want to ask him whether he can pay for this thing that I need that costs me $10. Because if you ask your mommy, she's only going to go ask daddy for it because she's not the one working in this particular case. You understand? But if dad is home, you're going to ask him. If dad is asleep, especially if he's in a kind of sleep, you're going to go to mommy. Mom, I need $10 tomorrow for this thing we're going to do in school. And she'll say, well, let me go into my stash. You know, she gives her daughter a little, whatever, 12-year-old, some of her stash. So it's the same scenario. Adam is in a deep sleep. So the appeal was to Eve, but through the serpent, the one who was lingering beneath the 5. If the emotions are being whispered to by the instinctive drives, that's the serpent, the instinctive drives. And the instinctive drives are concerned solely about survival. Then a pact becomes consolidated between the emotions and the instincts. And that pact is going to decide who will become the leader over your human life. In other words, if you leave your life to be regulated by your emotions and your instincts. Your emotions are so wishy-washy like Jill. Your emotions are responsible for jilting you every time the intellect is not available. Jack fell down and broke his corona, and Jill came tumbling after. Do you know what the word tumble means? Look it up in a good dictionary. It means to become confused, to become disorderly. These are dictionary meanings. So that's what your jilted emotional heart will become. So it's in no position to lead, so it defers over to your instincts. Hey man, you've kept us alive for these many years. Why should I put all of the pressure on my emotions to figure this out? Let me just do what my survival nature calls for. Boy, if you don't understand and see this world we're living in right now, just give it a moment. You will. In fact, this life will no longer be considered human when those two are in charge. When the emotions and the instincts become the leaders in your life and the emotions defer leadership over to the instincts, then your life is no longer a human life. There's no longer a human's mind operating. That life will be considered reptilian because the R complex brain is in control. And this devaluation of human worth has been the objective of modern day social schemers, and their plan is reaching an apex in today's world. The plan to convert human intellect and divert the human intellect to the point where it begins to devaluate and become lower and lower and lower on the register of frequencies, to the point where everyone, those 80% that Imam Muhammad pointed out and the 99.999% amongst the African American people that he pointed out, they are actually operating on the level of the reptilian brain. Survival. You remember that song by the OJs? Survival of the fittest, I gotta get with it. Rent man says that the rent is due. My little baby needs a new pair of shoes. I'm just about to lose my mind, one step away from the breadline. Well, I'm trying to do the very best I can. I'm trying to make it on through. I don't know which way to turn. I don't know what to do. Ow, survival. Survival of the fittest. Survival. I gotta get with it, 'cause it ain't no joke when a man is broke, walking around with his hands in his pocket, broke, busted. Oh man, listen to that song, the OJs. Survival. You see survival? You see the S-U-R in survival? It means the same thing as the S-E-R in serpent. It means that which is lingering below. So below what? The vivification, meaning the life structure. When you are living just to survive, you are living levels below what is actual life. You're not living. You're not alive. You are just surviving. So their plan in our day and time, 2022 and beyond, they think it's reaching an apex. They think that they are being successful, but people like myself and some of yourselves who are looking at this thing through clear eyes, we know that their plan is fast unraveling. I mean with break speed unraveling. What they had thought would be this world by now, under their grip, in their grip, under their hypnotism, too many people are breaking out of the hypnotic. Now, the purpose of the circumcision, in my conclusion, is to remove the mysteries which have been clouding the human intellect, allowing for the collection of debris to accumulate right beneath the topical foreskin. Where is this location in terms of the human brain? Just switch heads for a moment. This location that would represent the topical foreskin and what is beneath it that needs to be circumcised. It is just beneath consciousness. Listen to me carefully. Let me rephrase this for a moment. We're talking about that portion of the mind that if you circumcise what is in the conscious part of the mind, because it has become filthy, filled up with debris, we have to circumcise that part of the mind called the conscious mind, how we are making our decisions. And the part that we have to clean up is beneath the foreskin. So in other words, it represents that space between the top of the foreskin and the layer beneath the foreskin. After the foreskin has been circumcised, then the skin that is beneath the foreskin becomes the prevalent skin. I hope you understood that. This area exists between two layers, not of the penis, but of the human nafs, the human soul. There's an area that exists between two layers of your human soul. If you know anything about the three major parts of the nafs, then you'll understand what I'm saying. If not, just continue to listen and study and follow up and ask questions and you'll get this. What are these two areas of the human nafs that we're discussing? These two areas exist between nafsin lawama, which is the second stage of the soul, and nafsin mutmainna, which is the third level of the human soul before the human soul is able to graduate into Jannah, according to the Qur'an. Nafsin lawama is translated as the discriminating soul. And what do we mean by discriminating? The word lawama gives us the English word lemon. Lemon, Lemon. It comes from lawama. Why are they related? Because when you attempt to cut open a lemon and then just suck on that bare lemon, your taste buds are going to somewhat reject that taste. And your face might scrunch up, right? Trying to suck on a lemon. So it represents the discriminating mind that says, wait a minute, this is not the sweet fruit that I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like the orange. Or at least the grapefruit. But this thing is, man, it's, bitter. So in the same way that your mouth discriminates, it lets some of it in, or it might twist it, or it might add sugar to it and make a lemonade. See? That's lawama in the soul. That's what your soul is doing. It lets some things in and it dismisses other things. Now, isn't that the same meaning that we gave to the human intellect? The internal choice making? It's saying this is good. We let this in the door. Oh, these guys are going to ruin our party. They have to go somewhere else. That's what the intellect does. So the intellect is part and parcel of nafsin lawama. And the next step up in terms of the soul is called the nafsin mutmainna. And they translate that as the soul at rest. What a devious translation. Yeah, it's a devious translation. I don't have time to explain it to you. But these social schemers have been working on the translations of the Qur'an for over 100 years. Mutma'inna does not mean at rest. They were trying to send the signals to their competing Christian and Jewish theologians. You thought you knew what rest was, Mr. Priest? You thought you knew what was meant by God when he put the word rest in the Torah, Mr. Jew? And God rested on the seventh day and blah, blah, blah. You thought you knew what rested meant. No, we have the real meaning for rest. Because when you said that God rested, what you were really saying is that we're taking God out of the picture. And we're going to up you one. When we say soul at rest, we're saying that we're going to take the soul out of the picture. Imam Muhammad spoke on what? The great elimination of the soul. Do you see the word eliminate? You hear the word lemon and eliminate because it's from the same root. And when your soul no longer registers what is good or what is bad, and it begins to let other forces and their recommendations decide what is good and what is bad, who should be let into the party, who should be left at the door. When the soul is no longer able to discriminate, the discriminating soul, lawama, when it's no longer able to discriminate because something has gotten in between its ability to discriminate as an intellect and its ability to make Jannah mutma'inna. When something gets right in between there, we call it a threshold. When influences get in between your intellect and your intelligence, that's the threshold we're discussing right now. And they're able to pack enough junk between your intellect and your intelligence to the point where your intellect becomes non-essential in you. Your ability to make choices is given up. You've given up that ability and you let the government make your choices now. You let Dr. Fauci make your decision, life decisions about you, your children, your grandparents, your grandchildren. You let this man who is proving over and over again to be a crook, an imbecile, and a long-time schemer against human welfare. You just let him come into the picture because he wears the title doctor. You begin to let him dictate your entire life. And that's wrong. You need to stop doing that because he's situating himself between what should be an active and awake intellect in you. And he's burrowing his, and I'm just talking about him as a symbol of many, many hundreds of people who are with him doing this also. They burrow themselves in between your intellect and your intelligence until they've actually choked out the life of your intellect and its decision-making abilities. Then you have a seeking in the dark genetic factor happening in your DNA that needs guidance from the intellect, from what you're registering in the environment as information. But because it's not there, like the sleeping atom is not there, that Eve, which is lawama, it's the same middle point, that Eve has to confer with the lower soul or the lower self, which in this case is called nafsin la'amara. And that's from the word amara, which you get the word amir, which means prince or ruler. Where is that in you? It's in your instinctive drives. The amir in you is operating as instinctive drives and motivations that are designed for survival. That's what the angels are. They are the amirs of this life because they are designed, whether they are out in the creation or within you. You have amirs operating in you that are designed to protect the integrity of your life and its survival. So La Amara represents what they call the commanding soul. The commanding soul. Listen to the rest of this. We're almost concluded. The discriminating soul, Lawama, Nafsin Lawama, the discriminating soul, and Nafsin Mutma'inna, which they have translated as the soul at rest. Don't we say rest in peace when people die? That's not where you want your soul. Let me tell you something. Imam Muhammad would be so happy to hear this. Whether he knew it or not, he would be so happy to hear this follow-up to those important words that we're coming into a period of time called the great elimination of the human soul. And he said it's not so much talking about the elimination of your body. He said they need that for industry and commerce. He said they are working a scheme that is designed to eliminate the soul itself. How do you eliminate the soul? Just as a last point, by isolating, as I said earlier. The word isolate is a code word in their language. The ice means I-C-E. The soul, S-O-L, means the S-O-U-L. And it also means what S-O-L means when you refer that to the S-U-N, the sun, which is a symbol, as Imam Muhammad said, of social logic. So what you're doing is putting the freeze on social logic. How do you do that? By isolating people. Late means dead. The late Frederick Douglass. The late this one. It only means that they've laid you laterally. Lateral and late are the same word. So when you're no longer perpendicular and standing in a balanced form, you are late. So isolate is when they've put the icing on their scheme and convinced you that it's absolutely necessary for you to stay distances away. People ain't staying 6 feet away. People won't go visit people in other cities. People are in the hospital for whatever reason. Everybody ain't dying from COVID. I hope you didn't believe that. People have been dying every year, all of the time. There's definitely something out here that is worthy of being careful of, because there are certain symptoms that are unusual, even for the worst flu, the way this thing creeps up on some people. But that's not the issue. The issue is not whether there's something. The issue is whether the something is what they are telling you it is. That's the real issue. Not that there is something, because they've created something in a laboratory and they released it, obviously, and it's doing havoc, wreaking havoc. But the way they have you trying to deal with it is actually causing more sickness and death. You're moving away from each other. You're disengaging from each other socially. You're not wanting to speak to people. You're cutting off your identity, your face, by wearing masks almost 24/7 everywhere you go, in the car by yourself. That's actually contributing to your illness. And it is contributing to a psychological damage that we don't even know how to calculate at this point, especially amongst our children and grandchildren who are just going along to get along because daddy said do it, mommy said do it, granddad is doing it, uncle is doing it, cousin is doing it. So you got your little 5-year-old, 7-year-old out there now. It wasn't like that in the beginning of this thing, where they would let their children come to the supermarket and ride in the basket and the cart and all of that, and they'd be pushed around with no mask. Babies coming in, almost newborn babies. They didn't have masks on these babies' faces. They'd be crazy to do that. Where are all of the deaths from those babies who have been exposed? So you gotta really wake up. I mean, it's like there's not much more time to wake up, because souls are being eliminated. Stop worrying about your body leaving here. That's going to happen anyway. But whether your soul is eliminated, that's up to you. So eliminate is lawama. It's the threshold. If they can get you between the threshold of what your intellect is responsible for, kill off or dumb down the intellect, then they have free reign to radically change the dimensions and the functionality of your DNA intelligence. I can't make it any clearer than this. Yes, indeed. Satan has designed a scheme which will kill the intellect while causing the intellect to actually believe that it is making progress on the road towards pleasing God. Listen carefully. Let me repeat that. Satan has designed a scheme which will murder the intellect, cause it to be at rest, using the Yusuf Ali translation of this nafsin mutmainna that we're discussing. It's going to kill off the intellect, and it's going to do so in a way to still convince the intellect that it is making progress on the road towards pleasing God. Now, let me break that down. When you allow your intellect to defer over to authorities that have no credibility, but they want to be the leaders and the rulers over your human life and human decisions, then you are voluntarily assigning the authority over you. You're voluntarily giving that authority over to incredible forces in this world. But you're doing it thinking that they're going to lead you into the promised land. You get it? See, at mutmainna, we say pleasing and well pleased. That's what they have you believing about yourself right now. That you get the jab, God is pleased with me. Make sure my children get it. Yeah, we want God to be. They're preaching this from their pulpits and their messages now. That this is what God, well, he wants me to stand here in a mask and teach Jummah every Friday. Some of us will come up here to the microphone and we'll remove the mask for the moments that we're teaching the khutbah, and then we'll put it right back on when we're through. Some of us will leave it on and just kind of mumble and fumble through the khutbah and then put it on YouTube. And they think God is pleased with them. They think they're in Jannah amongst the God's ibad, amongst his servants and his workers. And they think that God is pleased. I'm pleased with God because I know God is pleased with this decision. That decision just rendered your intellect ineffective and, for all intents and purposes, dead. Dead. Now, I want you to equate that to the crucifixion of Christ as the corona was being crushed into his skull. I hope y'all are with me. The crown is also a symbol of the rays of the sun. That's where kings got that idea, from studying the rays coming out from the sun. What does that mean? The sun, as you know by now, is a symbol of social logic and our social concerns. It means that the social nature was contrived in a way to put undue pressure on the intellect. And in doing so, the intellect dies and hands over the leadership to the next one in charge, and that is the human heart. Now, I know I'm saying a lot of things that might be getting by some of you, but all you have to do is find this on YouTube and press play, replay, stop, rewind, play, and take notes, and you'll understand this perfectly. The sun, I repeat, is a symbol of the social nature. If the crown of thorns that they pricked into, you hear that word? They pricked it. Doesn't that sound familiar? They pricked those thorns into the top part of Jesus's head, which means that it became instantly in touch with his neocortex brain, the thinking brain. And it caused him to begin bleeding out what Imam Muhammad called all of the common senses. It's talking about the people, not an individual. That's a story for another day. The point is that this crown of thorns, this corona, had a subliminal effect. Whenever something goes beneath the surface of one thing to enter into the area of another thing, it's called a subliminal. Whenever they design language for society that bypasses your conscious mind and seeps into your subconscious emotional memory-based mind, whenever they do that, it's called a subliminal seduction. What is liminal? It's from the same word as lawama. From the same word as lemon, liminal. It means threshold between two spaces. So when that corona was placed on Jesus, his head dropped. In fact, it says that they first, after hearing him say that he was thirsty, it says that at that point they gave him vinegar to drink and hyssop as an herb. Imam Muhammad said that vinegar in the Latin language is called aceta. And he said aceta is a code word for asceticism. What is asceticism? It is the desocializing process enacted amongst monks and nuns and other people who say that I can't socialize with you. I can't be a part of your human regular society. I have to live separate from you. I can't have any children to contribute to this world. I can't have intercourse with anybody because I can't marry. So that part of the clergy is practicing social distancing on that level in order to get closer to God. You get it? They think that they're social distancing from each other in sex and in marriage and in childbearing. They think that that's causing them to become more beloved by God. See? O soul at rest, enter ye my garden, my Jannah, my paradise, amongst my workers. You see the trick in the language? So when they pressed that crown into Jesus's head, they said, that he asked for something to drink. He said, I was thirsty, so they fed him asceticism. Now, if Jesus is symbolic of the Christian population, as Imam Muhammad contended, then this is not something that happened to an individual. This is something that happened to an entire population through the institution of Roman Catholicism in this case. And they fed Roman Catholicism asceticism, asceta, and they fed them hyssop, which is an herb that lowers blood pressure. What did we say blood was? Blood represents the social nature and how it operates. When blood pressure becomes lowered, the concerns for the blood's distribution of its nutrition becomes lessened also. So you're going to find in particular teachings that social engagement, social concerns, social dynamics, which are normally instituted amongst people from tribal life all the way up to the sophisticated city life that we're experiencing on the most part, you find that those tendencies in people become lessened. People want to live away from people. People don't want to engage people. People don't want to share what they have with other people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is designing a present day scenario that's actually going to encourage true humans, once they recognize themselves as true humans, to begin to come together, to assist each other, to help each other. And it's going to be without concern for what your ethnicity is or what your so-called religion is. All of that stuff is going to dissipate and disappear as labels. And the true human worth is what's going to be recognized in this new and upcoming day. And this is why Imam Muhammad said, goodness is on the rise. You know, there's another way of expressing that term rise. Ask any man. Yeah, goodness is not to be circumcised if it's okay. But you need for goodness to rise in order to produce future generations who carry that goodness on into the unforeseeable future, is the point. So understand that. They pressed it into his brain, so he became brain dead. And then the next leader in charge, the human heart, they came after that also. Just like the serpent came after Eve, the Roman soldiers came after Jesus's heart. And they stabbed their arrows or their swords into his sides, his rib, to make sure that they had killed him. So that's what they're doing right now in this present day scenario. They are designing language, programs, media, in order to saturate the entire world with the idea that you cannot practice normal human behavior anymore because it might kill you. So they're jabbing their spears now into the human being's heart to make sure that the creature has died. You Christians better wake up to the wisdom in your Bible. So with that said, I don't think I need to say any more. I think I've outlined very meticulously what is meant by circumcision as Imam Muhammad presented it, the removal of the mysteries. And we're living under some very significant mysteries as we speak. But they can be easily waylaid. They can be easily dismantled, just like the clouds above. Just a little wind will cause those clouds to scurry and to allow for the rays of light to begin shining through once again. So with that said, I hope I've represented this subject in a way that Imam Muhammad would be proud of, and even better than that, in a way which brings further clarity to those people who have heard him elucidate on these subjects for better than 3 decades. For some of us who have been his personal friends, I know we have people in this audience who knew him personally, knew his family members personally. But this is not about personality worship. This is about the preservation of a language and logic that far exceeds any individual person. Imam Muhammad for us is not 100 and some odd pounds of flesh and blood. Imam Wadathuddin Muhammad, for us, and I believe I can speak for us, he represents a language environment that is constantly evolving. What he was as a physical, so many feet tall, so many pounds of flesh, and what color his eyes were in his hair, and what it was like to hold his hand. Those are the provinces of his immediate family and supporters, his wife or wives and children and people who were close to him as family members. They are the ones who have the right to talk to you about him as a flesh and blood person. I'm not talking to you about him as a flesh and blood person. I'm talking to you about the WDM as a language environment that is constantly evolving and unpacking its wisdom and its instructions for the future. And believe me, I'm going to say this as my last note, believe me that the instructions that were given to Imam Wadathuddin Muhammad, collectively speaking, represent the absolute evolution of Quranic logic, meaning you are going to stagnate yourself. And I know a lot of people are not going to like this, but you're going to stagnate yourself by not exposing your intellect to the language and logic of Imam W.D. Muhammad's findings, because those findings were inspired in him. Take that like you wanna. Are you saying he was a prophet? I'm not saying anything that I didn't say. Shouldn't matter to you whether he was or not in your mind or in my mind. It shouldn't matter. With everything I just laid down, it shouldn't matter to you whether I believe Imam Muhammad is a modern day prophet or not. And if you really don't know what the word prophet means, you can't be a part of this discussion. You have to know what a Nabi is on the level of the fitra-based letters. And I can tell you from what he said about prophet. He said, we can't be prophets. He said, but all of us have the prophet nature. So what does that mean, smart guy? You know what I'm talking to. They may not even be on this call, but they'll hear it on YouTube. What does that mean, smart guy? That all of us have inherited the prophet nature from Father Adam. What does that mean, smart guy? So you think you know what a prophet is because of what some other folks who don't look like you, don't act like you, don't walk like you, don't talk like you, don't speak like you, don't eat like you, don't dress like you. You like going to them first for understanding and for guidance. And that's a travesty of a mistake in this day and time. So don't take this time to rest or to be at rest. Salamun hiya hatta matla'il fajr. Peace, that's rest also. It is until the rising of Fajr. When Fajr rears its head as a new sunrise, no more peace. That's where we are right now. As I greet you with the greetings of peace, that obligates each and every one of us to keep the peace. Salamun alaikum. Thank you very, very much. 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 Thank you very, very much.